All right, here we go again. More on the Radpherd from I'm Not Childish. Yet looking at this, you'd have to wonder. So I have some of the work done as far as attaching I have a garbage truck right behind me, so we might have to wait a little bit. I'll just walk around and show you some of the structure. I've reassembled the back enough that you can see the ideas and more or less how they work. The springs go through the 6-inch pipe. They attach to the rocker arms. Okay. Attached to the rocker arm. Goes through the frame back to the other rocker arm. And then the connecting rod takes the force and puts it down into the trailing arm. And that's how that all works. Depending on where the coilover stops, I'll either cut a hole in the back. Well, there will be a hole in the back. The shock may come through it. If it does, well, then I make the bracket on the outside. If it doesn't, then I'll make a bracket that reaches in and is bolted to the outside. Either way, I have a solution for it. I can't remember, but I don't think these were in place. These are actually the top link off of a small 3-point hitch system for a farm tractor or someone who has a large lawn and also does some farming work like plowing a field or something like that. I've got the center section welded in, and now let's take a look at the progress on the front end. Here we go. I don't remember whether I covered this, but now these braces, temporary. Let me get my finger out there. Run along here. They're stitch welded on this end. They're welded on this end. Then there's a pair, which now I remember discussing. Run along here, and then welded together here and welded up on the frame or on the cross member of the front suspension. So then I had to decide where I was going to cut the chassis, the frame that goes underneath of the truck cab, and then progress up to the point where they go through the hinge point of the A-arm. So to do that, well, I'll show that later. So I establish where I'm going to cut it. I establish my end point, and then I connect the two in any way possible. Same thing with, well, let's finish this. Then when I cut it loose, because there's a section of the actual upper A-arm pivot that has been cut out. So it was cut off here and it was cut off out here. And that left just what you see is this is actually going to be part of the finished frame. Then Same thing has to be done on the bottom one. Now, if you notice, the bottom one does not take the same path. There is one reason for clearance, but I had it in my head I was going to do it that way anyway. I didn't want them to be symmetrical. So I moved back to here on the frame and made a cut. Then I came up to my end point, at least for now. Here is the cutoff piece, and this is where I stop the frame. Now, once I get the piece in the front done, which let's move to that now. So here on the top one, we move to this end. Once I establish this end and bring it out to some connecting point, then I will remove this center piece and I will weld in a piece of pipe from the end of this one to the end of this one. Now, to get center, I made up this little fixture, which all it is a pair of nuts welded into a piece of pipe, or actually tubing, that leaves real nice and snug inside of my pipe. I take it, I thread it on to the end here, and we'll see if I can get it right. I know I'm close. There we go. So then that gives me my locating point. I sleeve the pipe over it, which, let's see if I got something short enough. We'll try this one. I have to align the weld, the seam weld, and I don't have it. It's not short enough because it's hitting the frame here. In the end, I'll actually just cut that frame away to give me enough room to connect in there. So then the frame goes from there out to some point in the front, which right now, the way it looks, that point is going to be up this upper corner of this piece of tube that I've laid across here. That's not the end of the frame. It still has to go further forward, but I can't say exactly where it's going to end because I'm going to have to put the cab on and attach the front end sheet metal to have an exact locating point. Now, something else I didn't talk about, but once this first one, this was my first one I made up, when I cut it loose, this moved. So then I realized I needed to put in some kind of stiffener or connecting point to hold it where it needs to be until I get finished. Once I get done and everything's tied together, it won't move. So on the top one, I welded this piece in here, and it's attached to the temporary I'll say frame, the frame to truck front end parts. Then on the bottom one, this temporary one was tied into the finished one, finished piece of frame, and also to the top of the, or to the upper temporary frame as well, because where it was at, it could flex in more than one direction and it hung out there further. So now I have them tied in, which I'll probably have to do something like that in the front as well. And I think that's about it. I've talked about other things, like that cross member is not a cross member. It's just to hold the frame where I wanted it. I've talked about the back end. And I've even given you some ideas on what I'm going to do on the front end. Actually, I will say this, the steering box, where it's bolted, that piece of the frame I'll keep. So somehow I will go I'll cut all this away, and I'll attach this piece of the frame up to my tubing frame that will be there once I get done. So there we go. Another short video, or another video on the Radpherd. And I'm not childish. I'm at a higher level of immaturity. See ya.